Hello and welcome to the Secret Language of Numbers. This channel will explore number symbolism as a means of secret communication. My name is Peter Bull, and I've been studying this subject for many years. From 2004 to 2018, my research was on a website called Peter's Gematria site, and from 2018 it's been on Peter Bull's research site, and there's a link in the notes below. In this introductory video, I'm going to be outlining a very ancient esoteric practice concerned with the preservation and transmission of sacred knowledge. It falls somewhere between cryptography and numerology. In this image from the early 16th century, there is a man stretched out in a square grid with 16 numbers around him. To the casual observer, the numbers seem quite random and even meaningless. But the author was regarded as a sage by some of the most profound philosophers of his day. Clearly, the numbers hold substantial meaning in relation to the man. But what that meaning is a mystery to all but initiates. This delightful Joan Picus, with the auburn curls, the pouting lips and the cherry-red skullcap, is actually known to history as one of the founding fathers of the Renaissance. Giovanni Pico della Mirandola is famous for his Oration on the Dignity of Man, which is generally described as the manifesto of the Renaissance. He was also one of the main architects of the Christian Kabbalah. Born at Mirandola near Modena in Italy in 1463, he only lived to the age of 32 when he was poisoned along with his lover by Piero de' Medici. One of Pico's most seminal statements is that by numbers a way is had to the searching out and understanding of everything able to be known. The Elizabethan magus John Dee highlighted this sentence in his introduction to Billingsley's translation of Euclid's Elements of Geometry, and he explained that the constant law of numbers applies equally to the natural world and the supernatural. This balding cove with a flaming heart and a heavy-duty cape is actually the great church father St. Augustine. And Augustine had a very similar reverence for numbers. The divine wisdom is reflected in the numbers impressed on all things. The construction of the physical and moral world alike is based on eternal numbers. And here's another holy terror, although this guy actually fell out with the Inquisition. He is lauded today as the father of observational astronomy, classical physics, the scientific method, and modern science. In his view, the book of the universe cannot be understood unless one first learns to comprehend the language and read the letters in which it is composed. He went on to say, "It is written in the language of mathematics, and its characters are triangles, circles, and other geometric figures, without which it is humanly impossible to understand a single word of it. Without these, one wanders about in a dark labyrinth." And who was this lover of mathematics and geometry? Well, it was Galileo Galilei. So, looking at some specific numbers, the cosmos is a good place to start. Cosmic numbers reveal some interconnections between time and space. So 108 is the distance between the Moon and the Earth measured in lunar diameters. It is also the distance between the Sun and the Earth, measured in solar diameters. And it measures the interior angles in a pentagon. With an extra 0 on the end, it gives the radius of the moon in miles. And with a 0 before the 8, it gives the number of minutes in a week, or the combined diameters of the Earth and Moon in miles. Double it to 2160 and we have the diameter of the Moon in miles, or the number of degrees in a cube, or the circumference of the Earth in nautical miles with an extra 0 on it. At 3960 we have the radius of the Earth in miles, and at 3960 we have the sum of the divisors of 10,080. There are 86,400 seconds in a day, and 864,000 miles is the diameter of the Sun. And the great year of precession is usually measured at 25,920 years, which is 2,160 times 12. So these are common numbers, all divisible by 72, and they measure both time and space. In ancient Babylon, the Sumerians, the Babylonians, they saw the world as being numerically harmonious. Following from this, they regarded the numerical value of a name to be an essential attribute of the individual. And from around 2000 BC, the Babylonian gods were represented by numbers. For example, the great god of heaven, Anu, was 60. The water god, Ea, was 40. Shamash the sun, 20. Queen Ishtar was 15. And Lord Marduk was 10. There is a similar reverence for numbers in the Bible. And here we have an Old Testament patriarch, and all of the patriarchs had a very curious feature, which was their ages. They all lived to quite extraordinary ages. Adam 930, his third son Seth 912, 905, 910, etc. These cannot be real ages. They cannot be chronological ages. There must be some number symbolism behind it. We get a clue with Enoch that 365 almost certainly represents the number of days in the year. And Enoch is special. I've put him in blue here. There's one particular reason why he's special, and that is that 365 was not his age, because he never died. He was taken up to heaven without dying a physical death. So that marks him out as different. You'll notice that the second from last, Lamech, was 777, which looks very much like 666, or all those other biblical numbers which are triple-digit repeats. In the New Testament, it's no different. There are no end of numbers. Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of great fishes, 153. And for all there were so many, yet was not the net broken. So why did John come up with this funny figure of 153? One of the critical factors, it's a triangular number, which means that the digits can be arranged like pebbles in rows of ever-decreasing height. This is the 17th triangular number, so the base is 17 pebbles, and there are 17 rows, or 17 pebbles on each side of the triangle. 153 is also divisible by 17. It's 17 times 9. This factor of 17 is clearly important to John, because when he wrote the original verse in Greek, you can count the letters and they come up to 17,000 exactly. Not 16,999, not 17,001, but exactly at 17,000. So it would seem that John was counting his letters and he wanted to emphasize the importance of 17. Perhaps this might relate to the Egyptian legend of Osiris, who was killed on the 17th day of the month, resurrected on the 19th day. One indication that there could be an Egyptian connection is this. It's from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or the Book of Coming Forth by Day, where we find in this chapter there is a vignette or picture of a net full of fish being drawn together by 3 dog-headed apes. And it's called the chapter of the coming forth from the catcher of the fish. What's interesting here is that this is chapter 153. In the last book of the Bible, the very, very wacky book of Revelation, there are no shortage of numbers, quite an abundance of them. We find, for example, "And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that they should feed her there 1,260 days." This is in Revelation 12:6. 12:6. 1,260 days. 1260. Is that interesting coincidence? Or is it the fact that the chapters and the verses were put in long after the book was written? I suspect that is a false coincidence. Don't get excited about that. However, what does it mean? Why would John of Patmos have chosen 1260? Well, maybe he was a geometer and he realized that these two numbers combine the angles in a pentagon and a hexagon. This is of considerable symbolic importance in the esoteric scheme of things. When a pentagon is drawn on top of a hexagon, interesting things happen with circular geometry. 2 circles drawn through the outer corners of both figures form a vesica piscis in the middle, connecting the inner corners. And when the opposite outer corners are joined, a line which is virtually a right angle, or the two form a right angle in the middle. And there is a great deal of esoteric symbolism connected with the pentagon and the hexagon, representing spirit and flesh, or the divine and the mortal. Also, we find 2 Greek words, very similar looking words, which I shall pronounce as crisis and tysis, but maybe it should be crisis and tysis, which mean judgment and atonement. Do they fit into St. John's verse? Do we need judgment and atonement for this woman in the wilderness? Maybe that's there's something to it. Mysteries. Here is a fragment of papyrus from 3,500 years ago. It's one of the oldest mathematical documents that has ever been found, the Rind mathematical papyrus. And on it, apart from the numbers, we find the statement that accurate computation is a gateway to knowledge of all things, as in Pico, and dark mysteries. Numbers conceal secrets. Secreta de numeris doctrina. Those wise, old wise Egyptian priests, by those images of Sphinx they placed before all their temples, did insinuate that high and mystical matters should by riddles and enigmatical knots be kept inviolate from the profane multitude. So this secret numerical doctrine is to keep the knowledge on the inside, and all of the other people, the ordinary people who are not initiated, can keep their noses out. You're not allowed to know. This fella was known as the master of silence, is Pythagoras, and he had a very similar view. We ought not to communicate to unworthy minds and those not yet practised in the understanding of occult doctrines, those mysterious instructions that are only to be opened and taught to sacred and sublime wits. More secrets wrapped up in numbers and mathematics. This is an old cuneiform tablet. It was commemorating the founding of the Temple of Marduk in Babylon in the 8th century BCE. And on it we find a bland statement of the dimensions of yards and terraces, a mere sequence of numbers. But interspersed with all these numbers is a repeated statement, "May the initiated explain this to the initiated, and the uninitiated see it not." So the Babylonians were hiding their mysteries in maths, and in order to understand it you needed to be initiated or to receive the oral teaching. So that even texts which appear to be utterly ordinary hid esoteric meanings we cannot imagine. Georges Continue. And this was, well, I don't know whether it was before any of the Old Testament was written, but it was probably very closely connected to the mysteries behind the Old Testament. Hidden in plain sight, this fellow's got something to hide. Who is he? Well, it's Orpheus. And as it was the manner of the ancient philosophers, Orpheus so hid the mysteries of his doctrine and dissembled them under a poetic mask. So it's not saying he directly used numbers, but he hid his little secret under his poetry. How did he do that? Here's Esdras, who was told by an angel to write all these things that thou hast seen in a book, and hide them, and teach them only to the wise of the people, whose hearts thou knowest may comprehend and keep these secrets. So if the uninitiated read the book, they see nothing, and if those who are in on the secret read the book, they get catch the wink, as it were, and know what's going on. Finally, we come up into the very modern world, a book called Mythomystes by Henry Reynolds, born in the same year as William Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe. And in this book, which was a study of perhaps the more esoteric aspects of poetry in the day, certainly something that Shakespeare would have known all about, he wrote, "Now from this means that the first ancients used of delivering their knowledges thus among themselves by word of mouth and by successive reception from them down to after ages, that art of mystical writing by numbers, wherein they couched under a fabulous attire those their verbal instructions, was after called Scientia Kabbalae, or the science of reception, a learning by the ancients held in high estimation and reverence, and not without great reason." So we've arrived at the name of it. It's the Kabbalah, or numerical Kabbalah. And it means reception or received tradition. And it implies that all of the secrets are orally transmitted and never committed to writing. They were committed to writing later, but we don't know how much later. The legend is that Moses taught the Kabbalah to the Israelites when he came out of Egypt after meeting God and delivering the Ten Commandments and delivering the Torah on Mount Sinai. Although there are older traditions that the Kabbalah was known to Adam and preserved thanks to his third son Seth. Be that as it may, there is the tradition that the Kabbalah goes way back into antiquity before anyone wrote any books about it. And maybe that's true. So it's transmitted orally, and it used esoteric methods based on numbers, or the combination of words and numbers. And that implies using a code, a substitution code of letters for numbers. Here is a code using the Hebrew alphabet, which has 22 letters. I've written it from left to right to help people who don't speak Hebrew. Well, it includes me, but people who are not used to looking at Hebrew. Otherwise, it's usually written from right to left. But we see the first letter, Aleph, has a value of 1, and the last letter, Tav, has a value of 22. So this is an ordinal code, a straightforward code. However, it is of very much subsidiary importance. It is not really a big deal when coding language. What really counts is this code, which I call the long code. There are various names for it, but it is a tiered code with 9 units, 9 tens, and 4 hundreds. There is a version with 9 hundreds, which uses the end form of 5 letters. But that is, I think, a later development. Certainly it postdates the writing of the Old Testament. So I think that can be generally discarded. This is a code that is of primary significance. Now, also, we need to know that the New Testament was written in Greek, ancient Greek, and this too has a short code running from alpha 1 to omega 24, a 24-letter alphabet. But again, this is of lesser importance than a tiered code, which looks like this. It has 9 tens, 9 units, 9 tens, and 9 hundreds, although 3 of these figures have been greyed out because they were solely numerical figures. They were used for writing numbers. They were not part of the written Greek. You'll see that at the value of 6, we've got a bit of a mess going on there. That number was called digamma, or two gammas, 2 3s make 6. Just occasionally in Byzantine times, the digraph sigma tau st took that value of 6 instead of the independent 300 for tau and 200 for sigma. But this is the primary code that we need when looking at the New Testament. And it is very soundly accredited and recognized. It was the way that numbers were written in those days. The next thing we need to know is that gematria, the name gematria, comes from the word for geometry. It is intricately tied up with geometry. In Greek, geometria means geometry, and this is the root of the word. Some people also posit that grammar, writing, is part of it, but that's less well established. Now, sacred geometry is the architecture of the universe. It's what God used when he put together everything that we have. And this is why it is important. It is a divine and immutable connection to the nature of reality, to the world that we live in. And so this is embodied in gematria, and those who study gematria have to study geometry to know how it works. Geometry also applies at the level of the individual, the microcosm, because man and his body were thought to be a perfect mirroring of the macrocosmic geometry. Henry Cornelius Agrippa, the great magus, wrote that seeing man is the most beautiful and perfect work of God and his image. He doth contain and maintain in himself all numbers, measures, weights, motions, elements, and all other things which are of his composition. So a good knowledge of geometry was essential for understanding the macrocosm and the microcosm. Furthermore, in gematria, the numbers are like items of vocabulary, and if you just have words, they don't mean a whole lot without the grammar. And it is sacred geometry that provides the grammar. It links the numbers. It provides the key to numerical patterns, which may occur written in text, in Kabbalistic text. Without the grammar, without the geometry, you cannot begin to make any sense of the hidden messages, the mysteries, the dark secrets which are hidden within those sacred texts. In the next video, I will be looking at the Greek word cosmos, the universe, the world, and especially I will focus on the way that it was picked up and used in St. John's Gospel, chapter 1. And it will be seen to reveal a quite extraordinary host of cosmic information. If you've enjoyed this introduction, please like and subscribe, and hopefully you'll be able to see many more videos in this series.